Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. Wish you all a happy new year 2021. And on behalf of Team Goalmage, I welcome all of you to the first Goalmage of the year 2021. In the year 2020, we have had 5 Goalmages. Goalmage itself is a platform. It is a round table for discussion. We have been discussing issues, we have been discussing subjects and topics which affect all of us, from the Indo-China border dispute to drugs, online education, so on. And when we have been discussing these topics, discussing these issues, एक लक्षात असं आलंय की एक नॅचरल एव्होल्युशन झालं आहे ऑन द गोलमेज. आपण या गोलमेजमध्ये इन द इयर 2021, द फर्स्ट गोलमेज, it is on a very strong topic. The topic is close to all our hearts. It is right now at the center of the attention of national politics, of international politics, of markets, of economics, and so on. Before we move to the Goalmage, I would like to introduce you to my team. Shruti. Shruti will be the co-moderator for this month's Goalmage.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, Shruti. The secretary panel will be headed by Komal. And the technical support is being provided. The entire live is being done by Kapilesh. So I request Komal from, okay, there seems to be just a little glitch. Yeah, Komal is there. Yes, Komal.
Hello.
Yeah, welcome, Komal. And I request you to read out the rules now.
Thank you, Akhil. Hello, everyone. The secretary panel shall monitor this episode to ensure adherence to all the rules of Goalmage. I shall now make an announcement of some of the important rules that shall be observed throughout this session. Firstly, the medium of communication in this Goalmage for all speakers can be English, Marathi, or Hindi. Secondly, speakers shall conclude within the time allotted where so allotted by the moderators. Thirdly, the instructions of the moderator in respect to moderation shall be binding on all speakers, for instance, when putting questions. Further, all speakers should make sure not to speak over one another or out of turn where decided as far as possible. Please note that none of the organizing individuals or institutions of Goalmage shall bear any liability or responsibility for any words used by any of the participants and the presenter. The participants and the presenter shall bear responsibility in their individual capacity for the words used by them during this episode of Goalmage. Importantly, every speaker shall refrain from the usage of any words that may lead to the violation of any law in force. For example, making any inflammatory or hateful statement against any community. Further, no speaker shall make any direct or implied undesirable personal comment against any person during this episode. For the viewers, any questions to be put to the presenter, participants, or the moderator shall undergo scrutiny before approval. They may be taken up by the moderators as per their discretion. Lastly, at any point throughout this session of Goalmage, the secretary panel reserves the right to interrupt, to restrain, or issue a warning to any person who may be violating any of the specified rules or against any undesirable act or speech as and when the panel deems necessary according to the situation. In case there is continued non-compliance with the rules or restraint after issuance of such warning, the panel may exercise the right to disqualify such a person from participation in this episode. Now, we will look at the presentation, followed by a debate and discussion with our participants. Our moderators may then take up some questions. After that, we shall take a look at the summary of today's Goalmage discussion and then move towards the conclusion with looking at the topic of the next Goalmage and further announcements. Akhil.
Thank you, Komal. Yes, thank you very much, Komal. I welcome all our viewers on Facebook Live as well. The comment section is on. I would encourage you to participate in the discussion by means of your questions. Coming to the presentation of this month's Golmage. Friends, when we decide the topic for Golmage, we put it out 1 month in advance. Similar thing has happened. We put out this topic last month, in the last month's Golmage. And over the last 1 month, the issue, the subject has evolved and taken so many dimensions that this Golmage has become very important. आपण याला खूप वेगवेगळ्या दृष्टिकोनातून हा टॉपिक आज बघणार आहोत. आणि इथून पुढे पण गोलमेजचं एक फिलॉसॉफी आहे की द मोमेंट वी सी ॲट दीज सब्जेक्ट्स, द डेप्थ ऑफ डिस्कशन, द स्पेक्ट्रम ऑफ आयडियाज दॅट आर कवर्ड, इट मेक्स इट मोर इंटरेस्टिंग. आणि या डिस्कशन मध्ये आपल्याला द पार्टिसिपंट्स, द प्रेझेंटर्स, they are also of that equal caliber. So I'm very happy to bring in a presenter for today, Shivam. Shivam is a recent mechanical engineering graduate. He works with automotive company. He is also a lead at team Mechagrinics at SAE Tiffin. It is a competition held by Society of Automotive Engineers where the students are manufacturing a self-propelled onion harvesters. They're designing and development of onion harvester. Shivam has published articles in agriculture research journals. He also has filed a provisional patent on agriculture machinery. Shivam is a leader at Maza Hinganghat, a hyper-local mobile application. Welcome, Shivam. It is a pleasure to have you here, and you may begin the presentation on the topic for this month's Golmage, India's agriculture, sentiments or economics. Over to you, Shivam.
Yes. Hi, Akhil. Thanks for introducing me. I will be just sharing my PPT.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's begin. First of all, I would like to thank Team Golmage for giving me a chance to present the topic of such importance, India's agriculture, sentiments or economics. But before going to any conclusion, firstly, we need to understand what agriculture is actually. Firstly, farmers of this nation shouldn't be underestimated because only they have the capability to make 100 from 1. एका दाण्यातून 100 दाणे फक्त शेतकरीच बनवू शकतो. And again, it is rightly said by the father of Green Revolution of India, Dr. M.S. Swaminathan, if agriculture goes wrong, nothing else will have a chance to go right in the country. Now let's see how agriculture is integrated with Indian culture. India is so deeply related and connected to the agriculture that our mythology and even our Vedic text has its traces. Farming is not mere considered a profession, but is a culture in India. As most of our population is agriculturist, most of the festivals, goddesses, and even the customs are related to agriculture. Many festivals are also celebrated based on the various farming activities. Like in Maharashtra, we celebrate a festival called Mandwas in the beginning of the agriculture year, celebrated on the same day of Gudi Padwa. Also, many harvesting festivals are celebrated in different parts of the country with different names. And cow, which is just a cattle for the world, in India is considered as holy and is greatly worshipped. This shows that how deeply Indian culture is linked to agriculture. Now let's see how agriculture evolved in India. India is among the world's earliest civilization where farming initiated on the fertile land on the bank of river Sindhu. With time, agriculture flourished and prospered India to be called as Sone ki Chidiya. But in the latter period of invasion, we see that Britishers came and destroyed the traditional farming system and introduced, rather we can say that they forced our farmers to cultivate cash crops. And this was the beginning when farming was looked as a profit-making business. As in the early days, we know that food was grown to feed one's appetite, but now it is grown to earn profits. Still, after independence also, agriculture remained to be a bit sidelined when industrial sector was identified as the prime moving force of the economy, which we can say was a miscalculated move as it had not made any significant progress in the industry as well as agriculture. And also most of the nations build their economy's foundation on farming. If we take the example of China, they began their economic development from rural to urban. And now today we can see that where China stands. But soon we started facing huge food crisis as our agriculture sector was unable to produce at least to feed our own population also. And to overcome this, Green Revolution took place. And its outcome was that it made India to produce surplus food. Similarly, different initiatives and revolutions took place to increase the production. And many colorful revolutions took place in agriculture, like white revolution for milk, blue revolution, golden revolution, and silver revolution, which subsequently contributed to increase the production of that particular area. And again, in the year 2002, government declared agriculture as the prime moving force of economy. So this was nothing but a short history of Indian agriculture. Now let's see some of the significant figure of Indian agriculture. The most concerning thing is that our 50% population is engaged in agriculture, but the share of agriculture to the GDP is just 15%. This divergent figure shows that why most of our farmers are poor. If you take example of US, there's just 2% of their population is engaged in agriculture, and the share of agriculture to their GDP is also 2%. So that is a good match. Later, if we come to the cultivation part, then we can say that we are gifted land. From Kashmir to Kanyakumari and Kutch to Cuttack, we have variety of soil, variety of climatic conditions that enables our farmers to grow almost every crop on our land. And we go to the data, then we are the second largest producer of food grains in the world, which accounts for nearly 18.6% of the total food production. We are largest producer of milk, eggs, pulses, and jute. And also we are the second largest producer of rice, wheat, sugarcane, cotton, and also some horticultural products after China. Coming to the livestock industry, it serves as a supplementary business to the farmers. Comparatively, livestock industry is a bit at a good stage. There is very high demand for dairy products and meat in India, and thus our milk and meat industries are booming. We see that every year our milk production is breaking their previous records. But now let's see what are the challenges before our agriculture. Agriculture as an industry is the biggest unorganized sector, which employs around 90% of the total unorganized labor force. And we already know that what are the disadvantages of unorganized sector. Secondly, though we are fortunate enough to have second largest arable land area in India, but from that, around 60% of our land is rain-fed, which means that 60% of area is on nature's mercy. If rain comes, crop will grow, otherwise everything is gone. The next is, despite of the result of Green Revolution that resulted in the surplus crop production, this has neither significantly improved our farmers' economical condition, and nor whole of our population is getting enough food, as because they have no economic access to that food. And lastly, the most important thing is illiteracy and lack of knowledge among the farmers. Due to this, our farmers many times fails to take advantage of many governmental schemes. They lag behind in coping up with many new technologies. Also, they fails in identifying the market as they are unaware about the market conditions. Now let's try to understand what hugely disrupted the agriculture in India. Land reforms began in India from the pre-independence period and was executed in 3 different phases. Firstly, to abolish the intermediaries, that is zamindari system, and then to stop the exploitation of tenants. And in the last phase, in we can say in 1970s, Land Ceiling Act was enacted, where government was supposed to identify surplus land of the large landholders, acquire it, and redistribute it to the landless or poor. We can say that land reforms succeeded in India, but just at some degree of extent. If we see this pie chart, we can see that 64.8% of our farmers are still marginal, means they hold less than 2.5 acres of land. And this is what leads to intensive agriculture, the biggest problem of Indian agriculture. Coming to the next, the biggest disruption in Indian agriculture, that is Green Revolution. It took place to tackle the situation of food scarcity in India. It began in late 1960s, and during that period, hybrid seeds were introduced, and also use of fertilizers increased in large scale. This all collectively resulted in increasing the yield of crops tremendously. And the revolution succeeded at made India not just self-sufficient, but surplus producer in terms of food. Though it made our country to be self-sufficient in food, but at the same time reduced the farmers' self-sufficiency, as farmers from them became dependent on seeds, fertilizers, and various chemicals as input from the outer sources. And there are some allegations on Green Revolution that it was not environment friendly, as it used artificial fertilizers, which further leads to ecological imbalance. The next disruption is cooperative movement. Cooperative movement in India started because India is a land of socialist leaders. Cooperative movement has always been on the government's agenda. Cooperative society is nothing but the association of people to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs. In India, cooperative societies are under great influence of politicians and thus has remained no away from the corruption. Many cooperative societies made positive changes in the rural economy, but many failed also, as many factories and mills are which are cooperative in nature are running in loss. If you take example of sugar mills in Maharashtra. But there is an exception of Amul. Amul is the largest cooperative society and whose real owners are small dairy farmers. And this is because of the great vision of the father of white revolution, Dr. Verghese Kurien. Here is his quote from his autobiography. He believed that government's work is to administrate and not to do business, and ensured that Amul should run as a business enterprise only. And today we can see that where Amul stand. What this all shows that major reformations brought positive changes, but did not show any significant improvement in the farmer's life. And at many times when reformative steps were taken, which resolved the current problem and brought up the newer ones. Like now we are bringing in new farm reforms to find an alternative to a system which we created long time ago to solve the problem of that time. That is alternative to the APMC system. We will see about it in the coming slides. Now let us see where India stands at the global level. India has remained consistently a net exporter of agri products since 1991 economic liberation and is expected to reach $60 billion in 2022. And agriculture is so deeply related to the industrial growth that it suggests 1% rise in agricultural growth leads to 0.7% increase in the national income. This shows that how great potential Indian agriculture possesses. When agriculture grows, it grows from bottom to top, affecting every aspect of the economy. Now let's see where India stands in terms of productivity. Though we are second largest producer of food grain in the world, in terms of productivity, we are far behind. Here in the graph is example of yield rice and wheat. Comparing yield of the year 2018, we can see that we are far behind than the world's average also, and nearly half as compared to China. The same thing we can see in technology also. There is a term called farm power availability, which means that how much amount of energy you are giving as an input per hectare per year in the farm. In terms of farm power availability, India stands at 2.4 kilowatt per hectare, whereas Japan have 8.5 kilowatt per hectare. We can see that we are nearly 3 to 4 times behind Japan. And again, there is another example that China have around 15 tractors behind their 1000 hectares, whereas we just have 7. This shows that we are far behind. Now let us see where we stand in terms of technologies and the opportunities it creates. Though our farm power availability is very low, India's tractor industry is the largest in world. Nearly 9 lakh units of tractors were sold in the year 2019 in India. Coming to the startup sector, since technological advancement creates space for the agri-tech startup to introduce various newfangled technologies like IoT, drones, and smart farms as solutions to the farmers, many entrepreneurs are coming forward and are also receiving huge funding from the market. Now let's see some newer methods of farming. Many farmers are now moving forward and bringing up the newer technologies and methods in farming, like organic farming, which is actually need of an hour. Vertical farming and aquaponics are also other crop growing methods. Adoption of these new methods are helping farmers to grow better crops and get better price in the market as compared to the crop grown from the conventional farming. Now let's move forward and try to understand the current tussle. We know that the whole agitation of farmers started in the month of September onwards, when government passed 3 bills regarding the agriculture, which the government claims that it will bring revolution in agriculture business and marketing. See, marketing has always been a challenge to Indian farmers. Firstly, as because farming is not mostly treated as a business, and then the government policies that bounded their hands. Let us try to understand it. Before the Farm Act 2020, according to the APMC Act, farmers were bounded to sell their first produce at government regulated markets or mandis only. Actually, this APMC system was introduced to save farmers from the exploitation by creditors and intermediaries, and to give them a fair price. But as the time proceeds, because of huge corruption and cartelization in the system, it has now become an outdated system. Also, selling crops at APMC became a costlier business, as farmer needs to pay to middleman known as Artiya, as well as to the government in terms of fees. However, the act now allows, the new Farm Act 2020 allows farmers to sell their products anywhere in the country, interstate or intrastate. And also the act will promote contract farming and FPOs, that is farmer producer organizations. That is contract. We all know that contract farming has already experimented in India and showed huge success in poultry industry. Another clause is the removal of commodities from the list of essential commodities, which will now allow the producers and process industries to stock the crop. These reforms are facing huge opposition, mostly from the northern states of India. I think there have been so much of misinformation and qualms spread among the farmers. And because of that, they are afraid that their APMCs will be shut down and they will not get MSPs and all. Also, we can say that there are some clauses in the bill which needed to be looked out again, like there is no court intervention in terms of dispute matter. And also anyone with a PAN card can get a license as trader. But for now, in the last week, in this week only, the Supreme Court has put a stay order on the act, and a committee is formed which will now submit the report to Supreme Court, and the further proceedings will take place. So we have seen how Indian agriculture is the backbone of nation. Let us see what is sentimental and what is economical. If we look from a scientific or business point of view, we have to be harsh and take decisions and form policies keeping in mind the economic outlook, because we are living in a capitalist world. Because now we are competing at international level also. We should sustain there. Our farmers should be able to compete at the global markets, and this will lead us to take decisions like free market. Another point of view is that maximum of our population is engaged in agriculture. Indian farmers are resourceless and helpless, and around every year 10,000 farmers are committing suicides. And yes, after all, farmers are feeding the nation. These are all the matter of sentiments. But can we choose any extreme step among these two? Can we be always sentimental and take decisions like farm loan waiver, although it is not a permanent solution? And at the same time, can we take decisions like free market and let our farmers on market's mercy? As at some time, input cost becomes more than selling price in farming, because farming is maximum dependent on nature. If we take the example of soybean, this year most of the farmers of Maharashtra faced losses in the soybean crop as the crop failed. Whose fault was that? The company who provided the faulty seeds or the nature? This shows that agriculture is very dependent on many external factors. Going after any one of these will not be reliable, because sentiments and economics are not two different things. Even our share market have sentiments. Why not farming can have? Why should we always have negative sentiments for our farmers? Like, yes, our farmer needs sympathy, they are poor. Why cannot we have positive sentiments? At the same time, can we let the market forces to dominate every decision, as when our farming is nature driven? Or should we have to decide what type of sentiments we should have and then integrate it with the economics? But going after anyway or anything, we have to keep in the mind that today farming is not just a production activity, but should be looked as a business enterprise. Our farmers now needs to be transferred from just grower to agropreneur. So what after should we go? Can we choose any of the extreme path, or rather we should somewhat choose middle path stated long ago by the Buddha, or the golden middle way of the Aristotle? It's all yours. I just have a last sentence for our farmers, that they should be like mind of capitalist and heart of socialist. So that's all. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, viewers, for hearing me so patiently. Now we are open for the discussion.
Thank you, Shivam. Could just stop the screen share.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot. After that wonderful presentation, let's bring in our participants. Aditya is our first participant in this discussion. Aditya is a recent graduate of Ferguson College with a Bachelor of Arts in Economics. He's an aspiring finance professional admitted to a Masters in Finance course offered by ESSEC Business School, Singapore, which is ranked 4th in the world. He is looking to use various tools of finance for improving Indian markets. Welcome, Aditya.
Thank you, Akhil. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. The second participant today is Prajakta. Prajakta is a professional with 18 years of leadership experience in building teams across customer experience, operations, business strategy, sales, and digital marketing. Armed with an extensive experience of building business teams from the ground up, she currently heads strategy for B2B and BFSI verticals for a global marketing and technology agency. Outside of work, Prajakta loves working with the environmental and animal related causes and the simpler pursuits of gardening, music, writing, and traveling. Welcome, Prajakta.
Thank you so much, Akhil.
Yes. So let's, after that presentation, let's dive into a discussion. I'll start off with Aditya. Economics or sentiments? How do you distinguish, differentiate those two, or do you actually?
Well, thanks for bringing that up, Akhil, because I would like to start by congratulating Shivam on a wonderful presentation. And I like to say that I especially loved his last remarks, in which he said that economics and sentiment shouldn't or cannot in any way be completely separate from each other. It is, in my opinion, a matter of perception, because economics is, after all, mostly expressed in terms of numbers and charts and models, and people can sometimes feel that a bit of sentiment is lost, whereas sentiment is not. But the thing I like to think about is that the purpose behind all those numbers and charts is to address those very issues that people hold so dear to their hearts, just in a more systematic, logical, and rational way. So, to that end, I would like to just make a couple of points regarding the presentation. So, in the beginning, Shivam said that agriculture engages 50% of India's population. Now, I would just like to clarify exactly what that number means. The fact is that out of the 1.3 billion people currently in India, some 500 million people are actually a part of the active labor force. We are not actually including at the moment people who are dependent on working population. If we just look at the people who are actively a part of the labor force, or should be considered to be such a part, of those 500 million people, 41.5% come from agriculture. So if we think about it, agriculture actually actively employs 25 to 24% actually of the total population of the country. And coming to my second point, the fact is that this measure is it's a very broad measure. The place where I took it from was the World Bank, which records data on all sorts of indicators. And they explicitly mentioned that for measuring things like these, it becomes very difficult if there are problems like disguised unemployment or family workers uh, included in the family business, which, as we know, is a very big part of the Indian agriculture. As Shivam said, most of it is unorganized. So the actual number of the people who actually stand to gain, so actually stand to make some earning potential from the farming business is actually much, much lower than this.
Right.
Meanwhile, the dependencies on agriculture continues to be increasing.
I understand. It's an interesting point that Aditya has pointed out. He is pointing towards the structure, the organizational structure, if we take agriculture as an enterprise. So, Prajakta, how do you look at this organizational structure? Your views from your background.
Right. So I think Aditya has already articulated it very well, but I believe that every, especially in a sector like agriculture, there is a sentiment or the right sentiment that needs to rule every action that we take, and not because we want to make it only about sentiments and not economics, but rather to get the economics right. Because precisely because of all the matrix that Aditya and Shivam put out, that there's such a large population that's dependent on a profession of this sorts today, and it is still a sector that is struggling. It's still a sector that has its own challenges due to industrial revolution, due to sprawling urbanization, due to the change in the way today's population looks at food or perceives what is important from a nutrition standpoint. And considering all of those points, I believe that if I were to look at it from a slightly sentimental aspect, agriculture still holds the responsibility of taking care of the nutrition of this country. And if I were to go in that direction, then automatically it just says that, I put people and the need to look at this more sentimentally above the fact that, I would want to go and solve for the numbers today.
Right. Shivam has a smile when you said about the sentiment. I think he has a point. Yes, Shivam. Because you use the word harsh and now you're smiling. Please.
Actually, we are all human beings, and it's quite natural that we will have sentiments for everything we do. After all, economics is just to make our lives comfortable and to earn for us. But what on we live for maximum of our time, what we spend maximum of our time, it's all about emotions and sentiments only.
Okay.
That's why.
Oh, yeah. So let us, now that we have established the sentiment part of thing, let us go a little deep into the structure of agriculture. I'll try to bring the discussion back to it, because when we are looking at it, agriculture as a profession, agriculture as a vocation, one thing that is extremely important here is the input side of things and then the marketing side of things, right? The input side of things, the labor involved, the machinery involved, we have had a lot of discussion, we have had a good presentation on it. But when it comes to marketing, how are we going to find find the ideal market for the Indian agriculture, for an Indian farmer? What should it be? Shivam?
Sir, what according to me will be, yes, we naturally we have to go towards free market. There is, I don't think there is any option to that, because we have seen from the dawn of history that every other thing beside from the capitalism has failed. But while going towards the free market, we should we should give a proper security to the farmers also. Yes, because the input cost in the farming is increasing day by day, as you said.
Right.
It's yeah, it's increasing, but the output cost means the selling price is means as the food production is going up and up, the means the output cost is becoming very less.
Okay.
And because of that, we should see on this point also, like yes, government is providing subsidies and all to cope up with that.
Yes.
But that is only, I think, the way
Okay.
they providing the input from governmental side.
Yes, Aditya. Yes, you had a point. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Akhil. I would just like to add to what Shivam has already said. In economics, we always consider agriculture, the primary sector as a whole, to be a kind of a dead end sector. That is, not that it cannot grow. I mean, India's agriculture and cereal yields have shown tremendous growth over the past 30 years. But the fact remains that for a sector dependent on such a great portion of it, dependent on natural forces and being a necessity for the better part, the growth potential for agriculture has always a ceiling to it, and beyond a point, it can never compete with industries and services. So, even if we are considering letting agriculture open to the free markets like we have industries and services, agriculture still, I think, requires some kind of special treatment because uh, of its inherent limited growth potential that services and industries don't have.
Right. So when you talk about this, it still requires some help or some control. This is a general complaint that we have been getting. And I'll straight away head to one of the questions that one of our viewers has asked. What about the tax slabs? Why aren't we taxing the farmers? Shivam, I'll just read out the sentence. Should tax slabs per capita income may be implemented on farmers who have a highly profitable income due to agriculture? As per the Section 10(1) of the Income Tax Act, farming is non-taxable and without any limit. The question has been asked by one of our viewers, Rushabh. So Aditya would like to answer that, and then I'll come to Shivam, you too.
Sure. Well, with respect to what Shivam said in the presentation, we have a lot of difficulty classifying agriculture as one or the other things when you're talking about it from an economics perspective. Is it a business or is it a source of income for a separate household? Or if we consider it to be the latter, then there is really no line separating the poorest of the poor farmers and the richest of the richest farmers who are completely different both in terms of their land area and the number of workers they employ and their total output year on year. So, in my opinion, we could consider the tax slabs could be placed on different farm sizes and the differing sizes of enterprises, if as it were.
Shivam, any counter to that?
Yeah, I would like to first answer to the comment of the viewer. See, the income in farming is far less. As per the tax slab, we also, I think, I don't know the exact figure, but I think the government is not taxing employees which are earning below some amount of salary.
True.
And it is same applies to agriculture also. If we take the average land holding of India is just about 2 acres. And what a 2 acre of landholder farmer is earning, what do you think? What he is earning, you are going to tax him. And the second point is that, as Aditya said, yes, we have to go for tax, but by step. Many economists have suggested that we should start taxing farmers from large, means the farmers who are holding the large farms. We should go for tax to them.
Right. So when we come to this point, yeah. So taxation is one thing, but then again, the issue goes back to the same point that is it an industry strong enough to be taxed? Well, I'm going towards the technology intervention. I'm going towards how we look at the technology in agriculture. Prajakta, your views on where do you rate, having worked with these, looking at these things, where do you rate the technology side of things?
So, Akhil, I strongly believe that there are just so many incumbents in agriculture, and there is so much of dependency in comparison to any other sector. So, just taking from what Aditya and Shivam were talking about earlier, if you were to just purely look at it from a profitability standpoint, it is not just merely a do-all for the farmer alone, but there are so many factors that affect. And from a technology or from just merely a support standpoint today, while there are startups and while there are a lot of interventions that are coming in the form of solving supply chain management or trying to solve for agriculture as a service or trying to solve for the whole distribution in agriculture. But I still feel that there is a long way to go, because I think all of these changes have started happening very recently. There is a need for a lot more technology intervention. There is a need for education. When I say education, I don't mean it in the traditional sense, but I mean it
Right.
in the sense of the practicality of what this sector needs. And also, I think while technology or any others, whether you bring startups or whether it's government agencies or any industries that could potentially bring a lot of revolution in the way we operate today, at the end of the day, there is so much of ground reality that needs to be merged back in terms of feedback. Just to say that, if today we are producing or providing farmers with a certain type of seed, but if, say, the groundwater level at a certain location is much lower than what the basic germination would need, and then further growing that crop becomes a challenge later. So yes, have we given them highly potent seeds? Yes, we have. But can they convert that into something long term and profitable for them? Maybe not. So I think we are still in an immature stage when it comes to how we look at this industry and the ability for us to marry technology into this. But yes, there is already a movement. There are startups. There is AgroStar. There are startups like AgroStar, Ninja Cart, all of these who are trying to connect agro sellers with farmers, trying to solve for various issues within farming, and bring in innovation. So yes, I believe that there is hope, but are we there yet today? No.
Okay, so Prajakta, we heard what you had to say. Pertaining to what you said right now about the technological advancement, I wanted to ask all of you one question. Uh, do you think that today the farmers are ready to move away from more traditional methods and ways of farming into more technologically advanced ways in order to increase their produce or increase their output, and in some way or the other decrease their input into their farming activities? Anyone? Shivam, Aditya?
Yes, Shivam,
Yes,
technology
yes, I will go.
adoption. Yeah.
Yes, I think farmers are ready to digest anything. Indian farmers have digested many disruptions, as we have seen in the presentation. They will accept everything, but they need support in terms of infrastructural development, support in terms of technology, support in terms of marketing facilities. They will accept. We have to give them that.
But looking at the current market intervention, and Aditya has a point regarding it as well. Are they ready to accept free markets, Aditya?
Uh, yeah, before I speak about that, I would just like to add to what Shivam had said.
Yeah.
I do believe that Indian farmers are ready to accept more technological advancements, but I believe that at this stage in the whole world, it is vital for whatever technological advancements we make that we pioneer them, that we create and innovate those technologies for our own soil in our own country. Because the trend for technological innovation in any sector for India has always been that we import technologies from Western countries. And when it comes to other services, it is usually acceptable to a certain extent. But for agriculture, the whole climate and needs of the sector for India are completely different. And what's more, if we are even looking at the possibility of making agriculture as what defines India in the future, then whatever technological leaps we take, we'll have to take them before the rest of the world, and it will have to be taking place on our own soil.
Yeah, thanks. We do have a problem, isn't it? When it comes to technology, we are taking the non-Indian solutions and trying to solve Indian problems. That has been quite a feature of technology. And on a related note, we have a question, and that takes it forward in the education domain that Prajakta spoke of. Can we create farming as a career choice, like the IT sector, and hire and well-educated professionals in it, so that then it will help us with the economics in agriculture? The question is asked by our viewer, Lakshman. Prajakta would like to answer that. How
Yeah,
can we look at that? Yeah.
Sure, Kit. So I absolutely think that agriculture can be created into a sector and into a profession that ultimately moves into a profitable zone, provided we start looking at it as an enabler to everything that we are trying to do as a nation, and then look at economics from a farmer standpoint and not uh, from a yield standpoint to actually convert that into a meaningful economy at a national level. So it's till the time we are encouraging people to believe that they don't have to live hand to mouth with agriculture as a profession, and while they continue to do uh, take up farming as a profession, they are still able to meet their own needs. And that's what I meant by saying that, you know, you look at it as an enabler. uh, I think there's definitely a scope of bringing this into the mainstream. Also, just the fact that when I was mentioning education earlier, what I meant was the economics of how the math works out, and whether it needs to be a multi-crop farming, whether, you know, by bringing in a combination of crops, can you change the way your numbers look at the end of the day, and bringing down the overall amount of pesticide led farming that forces the farmer to kind of push the yield beyond the scope of what that land can do, but rather bring in more organic ways, and, you know, making it more like a community farming. Can all of this solve for a problem of this sort? Yes, but I think it is a cumulative effort, uh, not only from the government side, but people who believe in this as a profession, uh, and not merely from saying that, oh, how do I make money out of it, but rather how do I promote this uh, to make this sector into a mainstream without actually aiming for that. I know there's a contradiction, but that's exactly, I think, what is the need of the hour.
Aditya had a point to make. Yes, Aditya.
Yes, thank you, Akhil. I believe that there would be one essential requirement before agriculture can really take the reins as a separate and profitable sector. Someone would want to have a career in, as they would like to have a career in the services right now. And I think that point is the number of people who are currently in agriculture has to reduce dramatically. And I say this on the basis of a few figures that I calculated myself. It appears that at the moment, a person engaged in agriculture contributes about 1,23,000 rupees on average to the nation's gross value added, whereas a same person employed in the industries can contribute 3,98,000, and a person in the services can contribute 6,60,000. So my point is that any system, a system like a free market, which operates completely on the market forces of demand and supply, it usually automatically goes to things that it finds most valuable and most profitable to it. So unless agricultural per capita contribution to the gross value added or other national measures goes up dramatically, the market itself is not going to find any incentive in making it comparable to industries or services as such. And the best way to to increase the per capita contribution is to reduce the capitals in the agriculture sector. Thank you.
Spoken like a true economist, I've heard this many times. We have lot many people involved in agriculture. If you want to increase the per capita income, take people away from agriculture. And what this government has been saying for the past many years is that we want to double the farm income by 2022. In very simple terms, Aditya, is it possible on paper? If yes, if no, what do you feel?
Again, I would like to refer to a few figures I calculated.
Sure.
The thing is, currently India's gross value added is some 185 trillion rupees, and the breakdown of these three sectors is such that agriculture contributes some 13.9% to it, industries twice as that, and services twice as that of industry. Now, obviously, at this point in time, we cannot go back and decrease the value that industries and services can provide. So what I did was I tried to calculate how much agriculture would have to go in order to bring itself back to the level of industries and services at the productivity at which they are right now. So if industries are contributing 52 trillion and services are contributing 106 trillion, how much would agriculture have to do to match the level of people it employs? So the figure I came up with was something in the range of 113 trillion, which is quite a far way from 25 trillion that it does right now. So that would actually mean, if we talk in per hectare terms, that the per hectare contribution would have to go from 1,29,000 rupees per hectare to some 5,69,000 rupees per hectare. And that's a great load on the soil if we're talking about it.
Nice. Yes, Shruti?
Yeah, Aditya, so very interesting data that you have presented here. But also, while you're talking about contribution of agriculture to the economy of our country, do you think that if we take many people away from farming, would we be spending more on importing the necessary grains and food and stuff like that, and in turn increase our trade deficit with other nations?
Well, I would like to say prepare yourself for an unpopular opinion. Well, the fact is that all the other nations who are currently heading the world's international trade in exports and everything, they went there, they achieved that stage because they left agriculture at the early stages, and now majority of their exports are technological and service oriented. So I don't like to think that it has to be this way, but at some point we have to move away from our traditional means of exports. Most of our exports are raw materials, and the only way we can do that is if we move to industries. And I know that for a fact that India has a lot of potential for innovation. It has a lot of potential for original thinking, and we can have a lot of industrial and services innovation in the country if only more people were open to that part of it. And the more exports we increase of our industries and services, the better our terms of trade become with all other nations in the world. Because the thing with agricultural exports is that they are not at par with any other exports in the international trade, and that's why the deficit always remains. So if we take people to industries and services, and that actually helps our exports of industries and services, and even if our imports of agricultural products increase, I think the net effect would be still a positive one.
Okay. So let's jog back a little bit back to agriculture. The reason being, we have been talking about agriculture, and this is what goes on. We all have our own opinion, our own take on what we consider an Indian farmer or Indian agriculture. Shivam, I want to ask you, how does a farmer in Punjab compare with a farmer from Vidarbha? And what are your views on it?
See, there is a lot of difference in the farmer of Punjab and the farmer of Vidarbha. Firstly, farmers of Punjab are already at a good stage from the Green Revolution era only. Means they got much benefit from the Green Revolution time, because much of the Green Revolutions, whatever that happened in that time, took place in Punjab and Haryana and some of the UP districts only. Whereas if we compare to the Vidarbha farmer, they don't have as infrastructure compared to the Punjab's farmer. Punjab farmer have well APMC system. They have a well irrigation system that a Vidarbha farmer don't have. And also another thing is that Punjab's farmer is better than, means in terms of economically, they are better than Vidarbha farmer, because they are growing rice and wheat, and most of the procurement by the government at MSP price is procured from the Punjab and Haryana only. So that is the and it's been happening from many years.
Right.
And
so
that's the reason.
Just yesterday they released that some figures, as in 50% of the total paddy procurement was from Punjab and Haryana.
Yeah.
Prajakta, how do you look at this figure? What do you feel when you look at this?
So, Akhil, I think that a farmer from Vidarbha or this side of the country is generally a small holder in terms of just the land size, right? If you were to just compare the sheer amount of single landholders in, in parts of Vidarbha to, somebody in Punjab, you would see like sprawling acres and acres of land sitting under a single owner. That itself also gives the momentum to experiment, try different crops and grow it at a scale. So that scalability is higher, and in turn I think, like Shivam was mentioning, traditionally there has always been an upper hand in terms of those numbers for those farmers already. And the kind of crop that we grow here, or the kind of um, you know different types of farming methods that are adopted here, some way, in a way, because I wouldn't say for the lack of attention, but maybe the lack of focus hasn't given that kind of a momentum to the farmers here. And then it's coupled with, we know Vidarbha as a region is generally starved with respect to water and rains, and is so highly dependent on having a healthy rainfall, which is again a rarity. So just the ability to bring in more community led uh, activities which enable the farmer beyond just dependency on nature is not something we've been able to figure out on this side. So yes, when I hear it, is that how you want it to be? It is not. But is that what it is today? It is. I think the way forward is for us to figure out how do we get from where we are to where we want to be. And if I were to just look at a couple of stats, even from India as a nation today, we just hold 2.3% of cultivable land today, and just 4% of natural usable water. And in comparison to that, very soon we are going to hit an 18% world population to feed. So I think we all are in the same boat, just a little ahead behind in the race. So
The food will be important.
yes.
Right. So, a very interesting point that you mentioned here, scalability. So, we have been discussing problems, and solution somewhere definitely lies in scalability. There is diversity, no doubt, but Aditya, if we were to introduce scalability in agriculture, what are those 2, 3 areas which you think, 2 or 3 points that this, if you work on this factor, scalability will give you those dividends? What do you feel? And then I'll pose the same question to Shivam also.
Yeah. So firstly, I'd like to say that as far as the whole world is concerned, scalability is impressive in the past couple of decades. In terms of cereal yield, the production has improved tremendously. But speaking specifically for India, I believe that even today, 60% of our total land is agricultural land, and that figure has actually increased from 1960s. So what is happening is that we are looking to expand horizontally, whereas we should actually be looking to expand vertically. And I'm, of course, referring to the point Shivam made in his presentation about things like vertical farming and so on. I think the more the broader point that I'm trying to make is that the less we rely on natural methods of agriculture and the more we rely on more technologically advanced ways of doing it. Again, this brings a question of sentiment, because this is considered as going against nature, but if you really look at it, the whole process of agriculture is going against nature. So might as well go a bit further than that and leave nature to its own land.
Right.
So yeah, that's the major thing that I think would be important, that we get a greater control on our production techniques, as it were, the way we have in industries.
Right. शिवम, कुठल्या एरियामध्ये स्केलेबिलिटी आपण करू शकतो? व्हॉट डू यू थिंक? तुला काय वाटतं की या इफ यू पिक ऑन दीज थिंग्स एंड देयर इज अ स्कोप फॉर स्केलेबिलिटी?
Sir, the first thing is technology. फार्म पॉवर अवेलेबिलिटी मी सांगितलं होतं प्रेझेंटेशन मध्ये, ते फार आपण त्यात खूप मागे आहोत. आणि if we use technology, everything will means increase. Our production can be increased tremendously. We have seen that other countries like China and USA, they are also producing same crops as we are, like rice and wheat, but they have their productivity is so high because of the technology. So if we work on technology, if we work on bringing up newer machines and new technologies into our agriculture by increasing our farm power availability, yes, we can do it.
नाईस. स्केलेबिलिटी विचारण्यामागचं कारण असं होतं की आय वॉन्ट टू ब्रिंग इन द एलिफंट इन द रूम, द फार्म, the three bills, the three acts which have been converted. Now the implementation has been put on hold. Scalability, आपण गेल्या काही वर्ष बघतोय की this is not the time for step by step progress. It is a time for massive jump. And असं की आता आपल्याला रेव्होल्युशन पाहिजे आणि वी हॅव टू, द क्वांटम ऑफ जम्प शुड बी मॅक्स ह्यूज, असे भरपूर असे these kind of statements have been coming from all the sides, not necessarily the politicians, but टेक्नॉलॉजी मध्येच कुठेही म्हटलं की शिवमने पण सांगितलं की हे डिस्रप्शन्स आहेत. डिस्रप्शन्स म्हणजे जसं काम चालू होतं ते पूर्ण बंद केलं आणि नव्याने आपण ग्रीन रेव्होल्युशनचं जेव्हा तो बोलतो तसं होतंय. आणि सध्या आपण जर इफ यू लुक ॲट ऑल दीज द नरेटिव्ह विच इज गोइंग ऑन, I'll also affix this with the question आणि नंतर आपण त्या ऍक्ट वरती डिस्कशन करूयात की what are the inherent as well as the possible risk that are associated with these bills and how exactly will it affect the lower class population of our wealth pyramid which account for more than 90% of the population. आपण म्हणतोय की हे जे बिल आले आहेत, this is going to impact आणि कुठेतरी हे राहून जातं की इवन प्राजक्ता, यू मेन्शन्ड अबाउट द acres and acres, sprawling acres of land in Punjab. Harsh fact is most of those are farmed by landless laborers. Right? That doesn't come out on paper. So हे जे 3 bills आहेत, Shivam, I'll begin with you and I'll come to Aditya and Prajakta. How does this affect the farmer who is at the bottom of this pyramid? काय वाटतं तुला?
सर ज्या प्रकारे प्रोटेस्ट सुरू आहे फार्मर्सचा, की जसं हे फार्म बिल्स आणल्यानंतर एक सडन चेंज येणार आहे सिस्टम मध्ये, मला नाही वाटत तसं काही होणार आहे. कारण आपण बघितलं की 2006 पासून बिहारमध्ये पण एपीएमसी सिस्टम नाही आहे ऍक्च्युली.
राईट.
तिथे पण प्रायव्हेट प्लेयर्स जाऊन ट्रेड करू शकतात फार्मर सोबत. इन महाराष्ट्र ऑल्सो, महाराष्ट्रामध्ये पण कुठेतरी दोन्ही सिस्टम इन इंटरमिडिएट तरी ते सप्लिमेंटरी सुरू आहेत. एपीएमसी आणि कॉन्ट्रॅक्ट फार्मिंग पण अलाव आहे, प्रायव्हेट प्लेयर्सला पण घेणं सुरू आहे. तर सडन चेंज काहीच नाही होणार आहे.
राईट.
देर विल बी अ स्टेप बाय स्टेप, म्हणजे प्रायव्हेट प्लेयर्स हळूहळू येतील इन द सीन. दे विल कम स्लोली. I think startups will come first and later on it will move towards bigger names like yes, Reliance and all, but they will come in that.
They will come eventually. Aditya?
I completely agree with what Shivam said. आणि मलाही तोच मुद्दा मांडायचा होता ऍक्च्युली की ह्या सगळ्या प्रोसेसेस ज्या मार्केटचे डिस्रप्शनच्या असतात त्या प्रत्येक मार्केटसाठी वेगळ्या असाव्यात. आणि history has shown the same thing, that each market takes its own good time to completely change itself, and agriculture, unlike services, is a very slowly changing market and we have to allow it that kind of time. So हो, या सरकारच्या आतापर्यंतच्या पॉलिसीज काय अशा होत्या की डिसरप्टिव्ह चेंजेस आणायचे, ते सडन आणि हे असे, पण या अशा प्रकारच्या चेंजचा इफेक्ट दिसायला नाही म्हटलं तरी काय लागणारच आहे. जरी बिल इंट्रोड्यूस करून आपण पूर्ण अपहिवल करायचा म्हटलं सिस्टीमचा तरी. आणि त्यामुळे ग्रॅज्युअल बदल यावर माझाही जास्त विश्वास आहे. आणि यू मेन्शन द फॅक्ट अबाउट द पुअर फार्मर, द स्मॉल फार्मर्स. आय थिंक दॅट द मेजॉरिटी ऑफ द पीपल हु आर प्रोटेस्टिंग अगेन्स्ट दीज लॉज आर स्केअर्ड दॅट they will be exploited to a very great extent by private players, and this threat is real actually, because of course one can't just ignore that possibility entirely. I believe that the smallest farmer will be the greatest at risk of exploitation by the private players, because he is the most vulnerable of the lot, and he is also the most competitive, because all the small farmers, they have to compete with all the other small farmers in their own sector. And the fact is that they as a group have a very less bargaining power individually, which big farmers, they can have a great bargaining power with these big companies. So it becomes a kind of level playing field, but that doesn't happen when there is a small farmer involved. And this is something we have noticed in almost all sectors, where there are important, powerful people who are addressing grievances against the service providers,
Right.
and people who are not that privileged. So I think they would be affected the most when this thing happens, and that's why I think it shouldn't happen so suddenly.
Okay. Shruti, you had a question to ask me.
Yes. So I had a very closed-ended question to ask all of you. Do you think the recent farm bills that have been brought in by the center, which are on hold currently, do you think that is a small step towards getting the agricultural sector from being more sentiment oriented to the economic zone or the economic side of it?
We'll begin with Prajakta and then we'll go to Shivam. And
Yeah.
Aditya. It's a question I want to know all three of you, your views. Prajakta. Yeah.
Yes, so I think yes, you could term it like that. That it is the first step towards trying to bring this more into a center point and a economic zone rather than a sentimental one. Having said that, like Aditya and Shivam were mentioning, I think I have my own reservations with respect to what this could bring with it, because just the mere thought of aggregation, or the way we've seen all the other industries that got affected by aggregation. So when we had the larger players come in, whether it's an Amazon or a Flipkart, and the players of the world, so when they entered this market, we saw that the small kirana shop owner to the cloth store down the road took a hit, right? And yes, eventually they adopted, and then opportunities came up where they became the distribution centers for them. But I think that's a upheaval which I don't know whether this sector is yet willing to take or ready to take on, because they're already grappling with issues which we don't know how to handle yet, because then there are factors which are beyond our control. So yes, I feel while the maybe the heart is in the right place to do the right thing, whether it will all transpire into how it is on Excel sheets is a point to
Right.
look forward to. Yeah.
Shivam, what do you feel about the same thing?
I think that reformation is must. If we
Okay.
are not moving with time, we will be left far behind in the world. So this farm bill was very necessary to bring. But at the same time, keeping in mind that our farmer is already a resourceless, and he is already immature in terms of infrastructure and economics, we have to means provide them that facilities so that they will cope up with this.
Right. Thank you. Aditya?
Yes, I would just like to say that while sentiments are short run, economics is a more long run process. And we have observed time and again for all the countries in the world who call themselves successful now that the change happens gradually, and in every economic level, it takes its own time. And any kind of policies, whether sudden or disruptionary or any, they don't necessarily increase the speed whatsoever. And there's something again to go back to my data. The one of the most important concerns we all voiced was the number of people employed in agriculture and how dependent they are on the sector. Well, the reality is that in the last 30 years, since 1991, after the new reforms, the new economic reforms, we have noticed that the number of people of the proportion of the people in the labor force who are employed in agriculture has dropped. Now it is 41.5%, and it sounds like a lot, but it was actually 60% then. So it's actually a very good trend. And at the same time, we have also seen that the proportion of our India's land, which has been given to agricultural land, though it is actually increased from 1965, it has actually shown a dramatic reduction since 1991. So the trends are matching.
Okay.
So I would like to say that with all this, that we are on the right track, and every country takes its own time, and we'll have to be a bit more patient, and the change is not going to happen just because policy has taken place right now. But the policy is necessary all the same.
Right. As we go to the end of this discussion, we have covered a lot of points. एक one thing that I've noticed, आपण ज्याबद्दल जेव्हा आन्सर करतोय, याच्याबद्दल डिस्कशन करतोय, you are always saying we, आपण. But एक point जो आता running है, agriculture is a state subject. So the state government is responsible for agriculture. We as normal citizens, we are talking about we have to do. But those who are in power, they are saying you have to do and they have to do. Right? So union and states madla jo, I would call it not a tussle, but it is some form of a difference in approach which is clearly seen, or probably they are showing it because history, I mean, if you look at some years ago, the people who are protesting, they were actually protesting for these things. Now they are protesting against these things. कुठेतरी हा एक mismatch आहे. This is relating to the most popular sentiment right now, that is politics. So I want to know your views on the politics side of agriculture, how it impacts. Is it an impediment? आपण पॉलिटिक्स मुळे ऍग्रिकल्चरची ग्रोथ अडतीये का? हा खूप महत्वाचा विषय आहे. बिकॉज तुम्ही आपण सांगतोय की इज द लार्जेस्ट एम्प्लॉयर ऑफ द पीपल, लार्जेस्ट एम्प्लॉयर, लार्जेस्ट रूरल एम्प्लॉयमेंट, and Indian political power is definitely drawn from the rural areas. So if your answer is yes, what is the way forward? आणि आपण काय करू शकतो? शिवम.
यस सर, पॉलिटिक्समुळे ऍग्रिकल्चरची ग्रोथ अडतात ते आपण बघतोच आहे. कारण मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम्स गव्हर्नमेंट ट्राय टू टेक अ पॉप्युलिस्ट डिसिजन. आणि आपण आपल्या हिस्ट्रीमध्ये भरपूरदा बघितलंय जेव्हा पार्लमेंटनी भरपूर डिसिजन जस्ट बिकॉज people are means against it, they change the decision.
Right.
And now also this is happening. The protests which are going on in Delhi, I think they are more political.
Okay.
Because farmers there are, I think they are misguided. They are not properly aware about what these laws are saying. They're actually they're saying that our APMCs will be shut down and the MSPs will be gone. But this all is not going to happen actually.
I understand. But
Yeah.
what do you think is the way out? काय इथून बाहेर कसं पडायचं? Supreme
Sir,
Court is thinking on it, but I want your views.
बाहेर पडण्याचं एकच माझा व्ह्यू आहे की अवेअर राहणं खूप गरजेचं आहे, नॉलेज राहणं खूप गरजेचं आहे. पॉलिटिकली आपण म्हणजे नो, without being biased toward one party, we should think of the country first.
Okay. Aditya, what do you think is the way out? How do you come to a consensus and get that national goal in place?
मला जेवढं माहिती आहे त्यानुसार आता ऍग्रिकल्चर सेक्टरमध्ये APMCs ची एक पॉलिटिकल लॉबी आहे आणि ऑफकोर्स दे स्टँड टू लूज, वी हॅव टू ऍक्सेप्ट दॅट. आणि आपण कुठलाही सेक्टर असा पूर्ण मार्केटला ओपन करून टाकायचं म्हटलं तेव्हा यांना हिट बसणार हे उघड आहे. आय थिंक व्हॉट द फार्मर्स आर मोस्ट स्केअर्ड ऑफ ऍट द मोमेंट अँड मोस्ट प्रोटेस्टिंग अगेन्स्ट इज देअर लॉस ऑफ लास्ट रिसोर्ट buyer for their produce, which is the APMCs. We have to admit that.
Okay.
And the reason is that we have to also accept the fact that wherever in the world agriculture has been left to the free markets wins, it has not fared as well because as Shivam said at the beginning in his presentation, the market is extremely sentimentally driven and it can have its wins and fancies at all times, and agriculture is one thing that should not as a point be affected by this. So I think even for the large farmers, there should always be a way to sell their produce, and that being it is a very what do you say, नाशवंत असतात त्याच्यामुळे you can't just carry it on year like you do services.
Interesting point that, yeah.
So you have to have some way of getting rid of your inventory in the same year, and as long as APMCs provide that, they have to remain. But that's the role that they should play, and MPS can also have a role to play.
Okay. So last, and then I'll come to Prajakta. What do you think of the same question that I posted to both of them? Yeah.
So, Akhil, honestly, my opinion about this is, while I have been listening to Aditya, I think the only point that I think I tend to differ from what he's been saying is that, comparing agriculture to the industry or rather to, the industrial sector, I think somewhere is slightly an unfair comparison, because I don't look at agriculture as just because it employs 50 or 60% of our population. That doesn't mean the end goal of agriculture is to merely add to numbers, but it is, or rather to the per capita income, but to actually feed mouths in the right way, right? And the moment that goal comes at the center of it all, what we are all trying to say is that, how do you get a better yield, better crop, better nutrition, better, food availability for our country as a whole? Because honestly, all said and done, we still across the world are one of the has a large population among the top 5 undernourished countries, right? Being an agricultural country. So I think that speaks for itself, in comparison to saying that first let me get the core of it right, and then I can talk about numbers and growing it. So while I think the government policies are great, and everybody at the core of it wants to solve for saying, how do I move agricultural sector into a profitable economic business oriented number viable sector? But all of that should happen when it meets its core objective. And that core objective today is that you can't have people in your own country, like in the states of UP and Bihar and Jharkhand and Madhya Pradesh, which are anyway agricultural states, have high amounts of people who are children below 5 who are wasted, or the highest rates of lack of nourishment and food. So I think the government isn't looking at it like that, because I think right now the government is looking at this as a means to an end. But I don't see that end to be in line with what it should be. So yes, I think the whole political scenario right now is to project that we are a developing nation which aims at meeting numbers, and we are serious about our business, and we have a vision and a growth path, and that's what is driving the political agenda. But I think in all of this, somewhere the core the farmers, or the, like Aditya was mentioning, the smallest set of farmers are left behind, who are your maximum population, and then in turn so are the people. So
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yes. So when we are looking at this topic, it has been a wonderful discussion, because getting to know these many perspectives, it has been a wonderful discussion with all of you. As we come towards the end, Komal, the secretary panel head, she will be presenting the concluding remarks. Over to you, Komal.
Yes, thank you, Akhil. So in the first Golmage episode of 2021, we have discussed the topic India's agriculture, sentiments or economics. In the presentation by Shivam, we looked at how agriculture is an integral part of India's culture. The history of agriculture was explained and was seen through the phases of the Sindhu civilization, then the British era, the scenario post-independence, and then the revolution phase. We then looked at some data to understand India's agriculture currently. India is among the largest producers of pulses, rice, wheat, and sugarcane. About 25% of India is engaged in agriculture, India's biggest unorganized sector, with 90% of the unorganized labor force, which contributes to 15% of our GDP. The challenges include lack of knowledge and high dependence on rainfall, is what we saw through the presentation. The major disruptions that occurred in India's agriculture include land reforms, the Green Revolution, and the cooperative movement. We looked at an introduction of these disruptions as well. Next was India's comparison to the world in terms of productivity, technology, and agricultural exports, India's being $38.5 billion. Technology and startups in agricultural sector were then discussed, And we looked at our standing vis-a-vis modern farming and funding here. Then the APMC Act and the debated Farm Acts of 2020 were discussed. We looked at what these laws provided and what has changed. The previous situation plagued with corruption and monopolization, and the 2020 Act provisions for contract farming, opening of opportunities for farm sale anywhere in the country was something we saw in the presentation. How and why looking at our agriculture can have the sentiments and the economics perspective was explained. Agriculture on the one side was looked at as that profession with loan waivers in India versus the free market scenario that does or can exist was also discussed. As the discussion opened, panelists discussed how economics may not necessarily be divorced from sentiments. Viewers' questions brought the discussion to the point of the tax exemption of agriculture in India and the professional classification of agriculture in India's laws. When technology in farming was discussed, participants said that the Indian farmer is ready to accept innovation. However, we need India-centered solutions or Indian solutions suited to our soil. This will help us improve on our farm productivity. Panelists then discussed agriculture in comparison with the service sector. They talked on the need of confidence to stride, as well as an actual reduction in the number of people engaged in agriculture to bring incentivization in. Whether this would push India's imports was also delved into. We looked at how farming in India means wide differences in a state like Punjab, which is at a relative advantage, and in an area like Vidarbha. Whether the 2020 farm laws will bring a groundbreaking change or market disruption was also discussed. The participants felt that agriculture is a slowly changing market and perhaps needs to develop that way. Next, the vulnerability and low bargaining power of small farmers to exploitation, the vulnerability to exploitation and their small bargaining power was also discussed. When they talked on the politics of agriculture in India, the participants considered it responsible for hindering growth more than enabling it. That APMCs would stand to in fact lose due to the new laws, which may have fueled the current protests, is something that also got said. The participants differed in view on looking at agriculture primarily through figures or as an activity that exists to feed us at the core, considering poverty. They, however, agreed that India needs to encourage innovation, bring in more technology, and allow agriculture its path of development through opening up of opportunities. And that was our discussion for January Golmej. Akhil?
Thank you, Komal. We would now unveil the topic for the February Golmej. I request Kapilesh to share the screen. Yes, so in the month of February, on 20th of February 2021, Saturday, 5 p.m., we are going to discuss on censorship of OTT platforms. Entertainment has changed. Entertainment through television has changed. And in the last 1 year, thanks to the lockdown and so much of the race or competition of OTT platforms, I was just looking at it, and the big names were investing $0 in last 10 years ago. They were investing $0 on original content, and now these platforms are producing movies, documentaries, serials. They're there in the cricket teams, they're there in the football teams, they are there, and the entire definition has changed. And when we are looking at entertainment, do we need censorship? So this is an interesting topic. Do join us for the next month Golmej on 20th of February at 5 p.m. Censorship of OTT platforms. Thank you, Kapilesh. Folks, that brings us to the end of this month's Golmej. It has been a pleasure talking to you. Shivam, Aditya, Prajakta, thank you very much. Thank you, Shruti, Komal, and Kapilesh also. It was indeed interesting discussion. Thanks a lot, viewers. Thank you for joining. We will be connecting again in the next month Golmej. Thank you.